is marriage. And so, let me give you these are old statistics. Here's our problem nowadays, by the way. People are choosing to marry less and less and less. So these young people that are out there, most of them are just moving in together. They're not choosing marriage, which also means it's hard for us to track things like separations and divorce. Because you don't have a document, you're not going to the courthouse to get a divorce, you're not getting lawyers involved, it's just not trackable. At first you're living together, next thing you know, you're apart, but that's the end of a relationship. But back in the days when people did marry, here's what we know, correct? In the United States, 1 out of every 2 marriages ends in divorce, correct? Here's the truth. The truth is, in first marriages, 25% end in divorce. In second marriages, 53%, third is 74%, and fourth is 95%. Yeah, and what it says is, and by the way, all it means is, for those second, third, and fourth marriages, all it means is people who failed in those first marriages and second marriages, they go back into the pool and they marry again. The pool keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But what it tells us is there are some people who are really bad at marriage. Right? But and by the way, do we Christians have a better handle on that? We do it better, right?
No.
No. 26% of first marriages among Christians ends in divorce. We divorce at a higher rate. Ministers tend to divorce at a little lower rate. But you really want the astounding, and this is the application of agape. The astounding statistic is this. In Christian marriages, I mean dyed in the wool, solid, they live like Jesus. They don't just say, oh yeah, I went to church once, I was 12. I claim Jesus as my Savior. No. See, that's one of our problems with identifying Christians. No, for Christians who practice this, the Bible, and they pray with and for each other 3 to 4 times a week. You know, that's their claim. The incidence of divorce, well, there's not even a percentage for it. You have to use a fraction. It's 1 in 1,052. Isn't that amazing? Why? Why are we so really, and isn't it true, we tend to think marriage is the epitome of love. That's 2 very different people from 2 different families get together, they get married, they bond for the rest of their lives until you're little old folks and you're running around with your holding hands, and then all of a sudden want to, right? That's ideal, but we don't see too much of that, do we? Why are we so bad? And here's why. What's that?
Bumpy road.
Why is it bumpy? So, and I need a Yankee. I need someone who has lived up north, as I have.
Those are Michigan roads.
Yeah, they are Michigan roads. Those are
no potholes.
Those are Montana. Well, potholes come with this too. Those are Montana roads. They're New England roads. They're Michigan roads. Anybody who deals with sustained cold temperatures knows what that is. Frost heaves. Yeah, it's frost heaves. And, you know, Montana, it's easy for me to identify with this. If you're driving along and there's a whole lot of road, not a whole lot of cars, and you can be going about 75 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you hit those and, you know, you're in the air. Those happen because water is seeped underneath the roadway. And then it freezes. Now, does it freeze in Montana? We have 2 seasons in Montana. You have road construction, which is about 8 weeks, and then the rest of the year is winter. And so the roads freeze, and as that water freezes, it pushes up. Remember, because from your old junior high science, you learned that water freezes, it expands, and it pushes up on the roadway. And so that happens with the next screen. That's a repair. And that's when it actually can break the road. You can hit a huge, if you hit a bad frost heave, you can hit a huge ditch in the road that wasn't there yesterday. I mean, it's pretty bad. But this is what it does to a home. And it's hard to tell on this, but take a look at that deck. The deck is kind of, it's a cattywampus. It's been pushed up and it's no longer straight. Here's what happens to a house. It's not a great picture, but that can happen to a house. Here's the illustration. In marriage, you get the rare glimpse of seeing agape. But the truth is, we tend to think in marriage, and in our other relationships, but particularly in marriage, we tend to see the other three Greek words for love. Obviously marriage is going to involve eros. But there's storge. You have that relationship, that family relationship. And how many times have you talked about your spouse being your best friend? And you really know it when you lose your spouse because your best friend's gone, right? So all three of those exist. But the problem in human relationships is when we're only based upon those three loves, is the water underneath the roadway. Because you see, they're all emotional. They are. And like it or not, at some point, eros even is affected, right? It kind of cools off. And if you think about feelings being temperatures, as those feelings cool off, man, all of a sudden that water, which was an inconvenience, and you may not have even paid attention to it, all of a sudden that water freezes and it causes an upheaval, maybe even a break, and things go sour. I don't like the way you roll the toothpaste. See, that was just water 2 weeks ago, but after those feelings cool off, that suddenly becomes a freeze and it buckles up the road. You haven't made love to me in 6 months. See, the temperature has cooled off and the water freezes and it pushes up in the road and breaks the road. Or it's the family members who haven't spoken to each other. I've got a family that hasn't spoken to each other in 3 years, father and daughter. It's all over a business relationship. Because the water froze. And they're a Christian family, by the way. I mean, a solid Christian family. It's why churches split. It's why people leave. It's why people get upset. Why? Because little things that were just water, inconveniences, all of a sudden, and now can you understand why Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 says you can't leave the world, so don't worry about getting away from sexually immoral people that are in the world, or people who are slanderers, or people who are liars or cheats. You'd have to leave the world in order to get away from them. He says, no, don't even hang out with people who claim to be brothers and sisters in Christ, and they're sexually immoral, or, which was the issue at hand, or they're gossips. Did you realize gossip is on the same level for all of those who are really hell-bent on how bad somebody's lifestyle is if they live a sexually immoral lifestyle? Do you realize God puts gossip in that same category? Why? Because when that little bit of poison flows and it's like water, and you don't think much about it, it's just a juicy bit of gossip about somebody else in the church or somebody else. And it runs underneath the roadway, and the temperature cools off, and it freezes and it buckles it up. Do you see how devastating that is? That's why phileo love can't do it. Because phileo love is emotional. I love you, Gary. You're like a brother to me. Why? Because we've got this relationship and there's a lot of feeling to it. I love you like a brother. But if we're going to go through hard times together, that's not enough. There's even some of us who talk about this being a family. And so storge love is in it. So we really do talk about this being a family. I myself, that's a big one for me. because I have very little family that I call family. My family is generally church family. I even say church family. There's only one person in the church that you have to worry about the Eros thing with me, okay? So, and she's called Mrs. Page. So, but the truth is, I've got to get to the point that I use agape love. And how do we do that? What's the difference? Well, the difference is force of will. It's not emotional. You choose to love agape. Now, we're going to study a little passage here, and it's been studied before, and it's debated immensely. Both words, phileo and agape, are used in it. And some people say, well, you know, they're just using them interchangeably. There's no difference between the two words, and I would beg to differ. The reason being is we use different words for the same thing all the time, and we do it purposely, and they mean things. These are both plates, aren't they? Now, if I say, bring me a plate, and I'm going to give you a piece of pie, this one suffices, doesn't it? If it's a 22-ounce porterhouse, Bob, does that do it? No. That's why we on purpose say dinner plate. We on purpose say dessert plate, right? They on purpose used phileo, I love you like a brother. And they on purpose use agape. I love you by the force of my will. I choose to love you. John chapter 21. Both words are used. Go ahead and turn there if you got your Bibles. This is interesting. Background. We're going to find out in just a few minutes. This is the third time Jesus has appeared to Peter and the disciples, which should tell you something. Now, keep in mind, John writes this, records this, shares this testimony with us 15 years after Peter's death, much later in the century. There is a debate about both chapters 20 and 21, because chapter 20, at the end of the chapter, it looks like the book ends. And then all of a sudden you turn the page and there's chapter 21. You say, what's going on? Where did 21 come from? And it's also got an ending just like chapter 20. But John records this little incident by the Sea of Galilee, and you all know it. And Jesus is appearing to the disciples, and it's kind of interesting what's happening. It's a handful of disciples, Peter's in the bunch, but remember, the last time he and Jesus really had a heart-to-heart, a face-to-face, Jesus told him, you're going to deny me 3 times tonight. And guess what Peter did? I don't know that man. Get away from me. I do not know that man. I am not one of them. I do not know that man. 3 times he denied his best friend. Now, I don't know about you, but if this was me and I had messed in my nest that much, and I'm about to meet this guy who was once dead and now he's alive, I'm going to be wondering what our relationship is like. Would you? Chapter 21, verse 1. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, and it happened this way. I like the way John writes. Simon Peter, Thomas, almost known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and that's, just so you know, James and John. John does not refer to himself as John throughout his book. It's kind of unusual. And 2 other disciples were together. Bunch of guys, right? All hanging around. Jesus is resurrected. What would you be doing? Watch what's said. Verse 3. I'm going out to fish. Terry, I think, would have fit in with those guys like you wouldn't believe. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. This is such a guy thing, and for the ladies, this is guys, isn't it? Man, this is too emotional. I can't handle all this emotion. I can't handle this drama. I'm going to go out and do something that I know. I know how to fish. We're going to go fishing. That's what's happening. So we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. And I've done this sort of fishing. It is an all-night thing. You go out at sundown and you come back at sunup. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw out your net out on the right side of the boat and you will find some." Right. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of a large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Watch what happens with Peter. This guy loved Jesus. This guy betrayed Jesus in a big way. This guy is so likely just pent up with guilt and shame. And this is his best friend, this guy that he loved. And it was not unusual in those days, as you read this description, it was not unusual in those days for the men to strip down to nothing and fish that way. So he girds on his outer garments for decency's sake, jumps in the water. As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he